if you just pivot to make money, like that's great, but like we didn't have a grander vision. We went from hyper visionary, hyper risky to incredibly risk averse, but making money. So that begs a much more interesting question of like, what is the fucking point of all this?
All right, back at you with another episode of The Hard Pivot. I'm Zach Roseman, the founder of Draftboard, and I'm thrilled to be here with Vasu Prathipati, co-founder of MaestroQA. Is it Maestro or Maestro? I should have asked you that when we started.
I get that all the time, and you can say whatever way you prefer, but Maestro is how I pronounce it improperly or properly.
Okay, Maestro, I feel like I'm like an Italian Renaissance guy when I say Maestro, so I'll
it's a lot of fun,
that.
Fun definitions.
Exactly. So, by the way, Vasu and I were just talking, and he's actually in the middle of a coffee shop, and the sound is amazing because of his AirPods. So at least I hear it that way. I think it'll come out that way on the recording. We'll see. But I'm thrilled to be here with Vasu. I got to him through like actually a random friend, random person, and his story, from what I can read, even on background, is fascinating. Again, as with most of my guests, I don't know Vasu. This is the second time we talked. We talked for 15 minutes before just to make sure he was a real person, and he was making sure I'm a real person. And so I'm excited to hear his story. So Vasu, just quick background is you started MaestroQA with your co-founder Harrison like almost more than 10 years ago, right? And now you've gone through many different stages. I think I read somewhere that it took you 8 years to get to your Series A. And so
something like that.
I would love, before we get into the pivot, or in your case pivots, which we'll hear, I'd love to just give us a sense of, okay, 2013, who are you? Why did you start this business? What was the original idea? How did you find Harrison? Sort of the basic background.
Yeah, I mean, that's a time machine. And Zach, thank you for having me. Excited to see what we uncover today. And yeah, so I graduated from Penn in 2013, and I got on a boat bus.
We share that. I didn't know that.
Oh,
nice.
Yeah, I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and I got on a boat bus, came up to New York City, and was staying on some people's. Yeah, I don't know if that still runs, but that's what I took, and $10 was great. Yeah. And I came to New York City, and I stayed with some friends in their apartments in Murray Hill, which is where I'm based in New York City still. And the reason I wanted to start a company right out of school was based on an inspiration from a professor of mine that I still stay in touch with. His name's Karthik Hosanagar. And, Penn was great, but it didn't give me a lot of inspiration coming out of that school. I didn't fall into the finance track. I tried, but I couldn't get a job. So it was, looking back, a blessing in disguise. And I did some of the pre-med stuff, but I wasn't in love with it. And so I had this one teacher who was a startup teacher. He loved entrepreneurship. He co-founded a company called Yodel while being a professor as well. And I was telling about some of my, trials and tribulations of figuring out what I want to do post-college. And he gave me some nuggets of wisdom and encouragement to maybe try to build a company. And he said he had a paper that he was working on that was basically a research paper that he worked and completed that could be a good product idea. And so that was the source of the inspiration. What that paper was all about was, how do you take website data and internet data, and then he's a statistics professor or machine learning professor, and he had this thing called a hidden Markov model, so really fancy word. But
by the way, he was a machine learning professor before machine learning was probably even a term that people talked about.
Yeah, which will be related to one of the lessons around the pivots much later as we talk about. But
foreshadowing, I love that
for sure. Yeah, 2013. It was all, I wasn't a statistician. I'm mediocre at math, but I was like really interested by the idea of like, wow, the paper was all about how do you take data, run it through some math, and then predict the future. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. Right. Why wouldn't someone want to buy it? And so the inception
it was like the technology and like what you could do with it, like just attracted you. Were like, this is like gold right here.
Absolutely. And I was
by the way, I want to say also, like, I think you graduated what year from Penn?
2013.
Right. So I was 2010 or year 2010.
We overlapped then.
Yeah. Well, I graduated a year early, but I came in as year 2010. But like even 3 years later, like when I graduated, like no one was going to startups. I think one of my friends, like out of our close group of 10, 9 went into finance or consulting. One went in like YouTube product manager, and he's crushing it now. But like,
good for that person.
and then everyone in finance, almost everyone left, and most have moved into some form of tech.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely. Wait, you're 20. Yeah, you're 3 years older than me, right? You're saying.
I'm saying even like, of course, you're 3 years later, things change, but they can't have changed that much. Like Penn was very much a finance consulting school.
No, startups were definitely not a thing. And I wear that a little bit as a badge of honor, having, taken a little bit of that leap before it was more of a thing, but it's gotten significantly more mainstream, which again, I think impacts a little bit of the pivot. It had a relationship to the pivoting concept that we'll talk about later. But yeah, it was based on like, oh crap, like this seems like really cool technology. Let's go commercialize it. And I knew based on the paper, it was very math based, obviously machine learning based. It was like the whole paper was this concept of a hidden Markov model, which someone Googles afterwards. It'll give you a sense of the level of mathiness to the idea. And so I knew I needed to find a highly technical co-founder. I didn't know how to code. I didn't know how to sell. I didn't really know how to do much of anything besides talk and try hard and think critically. But I had no like real skills that were ever applicable. But I knew I needed to find a technical co-founder and someone that it wasn't like I wasn't going to look for a design-centric co-founder or a product sensibility co-founder, but I needed someone who like loved these algorithms, would read this paper that I had and geek out on it and want to implement it in code and just be fascinated by that type of stuff. And that was a real blessing in disguise because it attracted. And then basically I was on AngelList, and you can imagine how much smaller AngelList was in 2013 than today. And it was a much smaller social network of people. I cold message folks that summer in New York City. And I met my co-founder through AngelList, and he was still at MIT. He was interning doing machine learning modeling for a hedge fund. And he's incredible. And that's a whole different talk track to go down. But we met at a Think Coffee in Union Square, and I sent him the paper in advance, and the paper it piqued his intellectual curiosity, and I was scribbling all my ideas down. And
he was at a hedge fund. Harrison was at a hedge fund?
Interning, but he was still at MIT because he ended up dropping out early. But he was still at MIT. He was just interning that summer.
I feel like, by the way, I feel like, California doesn't have, like, SF doesn't have the same finance culture where, like, you can get a job out of college and work as a quant and work in a hedge fund, make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So I'm just thinking about, like putting myself in Harrison's shoes, like, oh my, he was, like, giving up, like, a big payday going to work for some quant hedge fund or finance job to take this job on the startup, to take this risk.
For sure. I mean, that would be some people's trade-off. I don't think that was his. I think he wanted to build something, and so he was for sure. There. Yeah, but some people would definitely have that trade-off, but sometimes those aren't the right people.
It's all about preferences at the end of the day, right? Like, it's like if your preference is to try to go for something bigger or different, then that's what you'll do.
Yeah, so like I don't think that it's more preferences than trade-offs, especially at the co-founder level, because you don't want someone to make a trade-off like where they feel in many ways when you're making such a deep commitment. Like you want to find someone, and I got very lucky that there's such a lesson here that I missed in the first pivot. But the nature of the thing I got from my professor was going to attract somebody like Harrison, who's incredible, versus if it was an idea that was far less technical, far less mathy, far less innovative, like in that sense, forward looking. And so that's how I met him. And obviously we actually got rid of that paper. We don't do anything with that paper anymore today, but we learned a ton of, it's what got us started.
Did you come to him with like a product idea? Or did you say there's something around this algorithm that we should build?
The algorithm, the paper was closer to a product idea because the algorithm and the paper, like when it was proving the effectiveness of this algorithm and machine learning model, was within a context of a specific product problem of, I'm going to take this website data and I'm going to figure out which of these ads that a user saw, which one contributed to their purchase. So that was the idea. Like, how do you do advertising attribution?
Right, which is notoriously difficult. It remains that way.
It remains that way. And I knew nothing about ad tech or demand side platforms or supply side platforms or the hidden world of internet advertising. I learned a lot of it.
By the way, I tried the previous job, when I was at IEC, I tried for years to understand DSPs and SSPs and trading desks.
Oh yeah.
I feel like unless you're in it and operating it every day, it's like gobbledygook. The lines between what everyone does felt so blurred. And unless you're going to spend hundreds of hours investing, which you did.
Yeah. You have to, hundreds of hours you can get there. You don't need to, I couldn't understand that machine learning paper after hundreds of hours, truly understand it, Right. So there's levels to it, but that's one where, yes, you've got hundreds of hours, then you could. And I spent years, it's probably 1,000 hours plus trying to understand it. which in some ways is a waste, but I'm sure it has some hidden benefits.
Okay, so you have this idea. So you specifically in advertising attribution, like you start the company, like do you raise money? Like is it just you bootstrapping?
So I meet Harris at his coffee shop, and we just cranking, and he's like, he's got his internship, so we're just like cranking. And there's a good lesson there as well. Like, thank God I wasn't too religious.
21, 22 or something.
Yeah, exactly. And the good lesson there as well, like I wasn't too religious around like I need someone full time to work with this on this thing. Like I optimized for the smartest, most trusting person I could meet, and that paid out to be a very good decision. And there was a lot of risk on like part time and this stuff, but so we were just like hacking away at it. To be honest, I can't remember what I really contributed back then because I couldn't code and we had no customers, and so I must have psyched myself out to try and make a contribution. But
you're probably underselling yourself. Like the direction, no problem. Okay, I'll let you tell the story. But still, I feel like if you were not pulling your weight, then Harrison probably been like, "What do I need this guy for?"
For sure. I'm sure he knew I was trying my hardest. It wasn't like I was being lazy. But in hindsight, it's like, wow, what was I doing? It clearly wasn't that productive. It wasn't about effort as much as impact.
By the way, you'll be fascinating for you to like go like into Gemini or ChatGPT, be like, ingest my emails or whatever you're using for chat back in 2013, and be like, what was I doing?
Honestly, it's a good idea. We have the same email instance, and yeah, there's going to be a lot of good, we sometimes joke around not going too far back and cringing, but there'll be a time to go back and cringe and see what was going on back then. But totally. So there was some idea, and then I was eventually like, I got through a connection, an internship to be an assistant with this guy named Nahal, who's still an investor. Who is an investor today. And I was like walking his dog, helping him set up his desk for his new office. She's like an assistant. And then he met Harrison and he saw how incredible Harrison was. And he was like, stop being my assistant. Here's $250K. And so that got us off to the races.
And that sort of enabled both of you to full-time on the idea.
Close. Yeah. I mean, I was already close enough to full-time. Like I was his intern on the side, basically. But for him, he was still for like 6 or 7 more months or maybe a year at MIT. And so he dropped out after that. And so it did help after that, but for sure, it helped add a lot more credibility to let's go and make this full time and go for it.
All right. So it's the two of you, you're building an ad attribution platform. That changed though at some point. Was it quickly? Was it slowly? And why? And then we'll dig into the details.
Yeah. It took about a year to 2 years to like kind of bail on it. It went from that to marketing automation. And we tried to still stay connected to the core algorithm, but in our marketing automation application. And
like sorry, just to be clear, like our marketing automation, like what Braze or like Lean Plum does, or yeah, okay.
Totally. It was like trying to be like Braze. Those would be our there was Kahuna, Lean Plum, Braze at the time.
Iterable,
Iterable, yeah, but we were trying to be the algorithm layer, not the ESP or the push notification. We wanted to be the intelligence layer of it,
right? Not the pipes,
not the pipes. Like pipes are dumb. The intelligence where all the values at, and there's a lot of truth to that. And there's many reasons why. Yeah, there's a lot of lessons there. Like we weren't that wrong relative to how hard we pivoted, but that's what we pivoted to. And so I would say medium. It wasn't super slow. It wasn't super fast. And
how did you even go from like, okay, ad attribution to marketing? Like, what was that? Like, that sounds like a big change also, but it wasn't just like, oh, this is not working. Let's just try something else with the algorithm.
Yeah, it was a combination of like, we're like, oh my God, this advertising attribution thing is way more complex. We don't feel great about our ideas in there. And then Nahal when he invested in us, they were all about mobile, and this was the rise of the App Store, and mobile was like the future.
Oh, yeah.
And so we were thinking very much like, what does mobile, like we're trying to get more mobile oriented. And so I think we were like then starting to see like the Kahunas and the Lean Plums of the world. And honestly, like it was so long ago, like it probably was like, oh, like why don't we get closer to the action layer than just the analysis layer of the advertising attribution? It wasn't probably very good logic as much as like we were around a confluence of ideas. And we took another stab at it in a different way, as we were just like iterating on what would be more valuable. But it wasn't necessarily a good idea. Like there wasn't great logic in hindsight. Like there wasn't great logic of what to do next. in some ways there wasn't great conviction in even the advertising attribution to even pursue it. So we were kind of like this flailing.
Yeah. Did you have customers? Did you have a product? Like what with either of the advertising or marketing solutions before you ended up moving to? We'll talk about your ultimate, pivot.
Yeah, for the advertising attribution, we had pilots for sure. We got people's data and we would run this analysis on them. And it was such a terrible UI because it was almost like it was if you watch like some of the stat professors, it would look like our product was like a whiteboard of probabilities and stuff. It was pretty useless, but like we didn't have a product yet, but we had much more of a product. We didn't have many customers there, none paying, and all pilots. But then we had a lot more customers on the marketing automation, which we can get to in a little bit. We had like Golf Channel, SeatGeek, a bunch of startups, primarily on that one.
All right, so maybe let's move to the marketing side. So you pivot to the marketing stuff, and you say, let's apply this algorithm to marketing automation. It is the early days of all these companies that, Braze is a public company. I don't know what their valuation is, but they went public, multi-billion dollars, like fantastic success story then. So it's early days of all of those companies. So do you think what was different about it for you guys that you guys didn't like find your footing or feel like it was a big enough space, or what was it where you're like, this isn't ours, this isn't for us?
Yeah, it's a great question. So even when there's Localytics, there's Braze, Paul actually sent me a picture of a panel, and it was Mark who started Braze, this guy Henry who's the CTO of Localytics. I'm like sitting next to him. There's these two other folks, and you can see.
You were in the conversation. You were there. You were like there. Yeah,
I was definitely there, and I mean it's not like a big there, but I was somewhere in this world of the mobile marketing automation stuff, and so it's so interesting. I was always like, oh man, they're focusing on the pipes. Like, that's so dumb. All this stuff is moving to the intelligence layer. Like, that's the future. And a couple things. One is like the Brazes of the world, and like them being the most successful of them because the rest kind of seeded out. They did pivot. They pivoted into email, and that's all. I'm sure that had a huge. And so they went to a far more known market. Like they were starting in push notifications. I'm sure they had some great customers in push, but like, mobile apps didn't turn out to be the end all be all that people were saying. They said the end of the web and end of the mobile web, and everything's going to be a mobile app. Like now it's obviously everything. And so, for them to go for the explosive growth, they had to rip out our responses. So they had to go after core email systems, And so we were all wrong in many ways there. But what I think the difference between a Braze and a Maestro is they have far more conviction around just there was an opportunity in marketing. They were passionate about marketing, and we were chasing a couple of things. One is we were like, I don't want to build an email service provider. That doesn't seem like something I'd be passionate about. Right. And like, that seems super crowded. And then that was part of it, but it goes back to like with these pivots, there's good lessons we learned. But one of the things that matters more is like, I could have maybe made the advertising attribution thing work if I had more conviction and vision there. Like, it wasn't the idea or the space. It was probably more me than that, the idea in space. Or same with the world of Braze and the marketing automation. Like, and I'll tie it to some later lessons, but obviously I could have made it work. I could have extended from the algorithm and built the pipes. What if you would definitely would have got some customers there, right? Like, and so there is something around, like, clearly I didn't have the conviction and the vision in that market to continue to iterate and stay there, because the intelligence part was really good. That was like you look at that now, it's like that would be what's the word where you could see in the future, precocious or omniscient, prescient, or whatever the word is. Prescient. Like, it'd be quite prescient. So that was like one big learning and takeaway. Arun and I reflect on that moment. But the more practical one that we felt even more was two things. One is algorithms. And this is really helpful because I can apply this lesson now as AI has become far more helpful. But when we were building these machine learning algorithms for customers, we would, put their website behavior and then map out some user behavior based on these algorithms that we would integrate with the sales through, or we integrate with the marketing automation to trigger the action. So we would trigger actions through these ESPs. Every algorithm was a pain in the butt to like set up for each customer. Like, it didn't, you had to like overall.
It was like bespoke.
Enough. Yeah. Like, you had to tweak it because like when you took the website data for Boxed on e-commerce startup, and then you'd also take it for SeatGeek, the user behavior is super different. And so it's not really that similar. And then you had to like almost build a custom understanding of the user behavior. Like if you even look like a mix panel, like it's not, you need a mix panel. When you define a funnel, you do need the user to define the funnel in a way that works for a SeatGeek versus box. And then when you have a black box algorithm, the only person that can do that is the company. You can't be the customer, especially those customers at that time. Like it was way too far advanced for where people were.
Now to take a slight tangent, like do LLMs change that?
Yes. And that's a huge, and we can get to that in a little bit for sure. Yeah. Like the difficulty to use this stuff and scale it across customers, it made sense why it didn't take off back then. But now you can make the ease of use way lower and the generalizability way wider. That is, we need to rethink a lot of things around this idea.
So you can have one core algorithm that is applicable to many different kinds of services or businesses versus before you're limited by the technology, even though you had this algorithm that you got super excited about. Now, let me ask about the algorithm, because you got enamored with it with your Professor Kartik. Sorry, I forgot his name, but I'm going to call him Professor Kartik if that's okay, right? Yeah. And then you bring it to Harrison. You work on the ad attribution platform, doesn't work. You say we can actually leverage this algorithm in marketing automation. You bring it there, it doesn't work. Do you, looking back, feel like you were too beholden to the particular algorithm? Like, do you feel like
yes,
that hindered you in any way?
Yeah, and that's the lesson we applied going forward, was like, screw the algorithm. Like, that is clearly a sunk cost fallacy when we did get it right. Let's rethink it from scratch. And, we had given some equity to the whole professors. They're kind enough to give it back, a large percentage of it after we switched away from it. But it was limiting our thinking in a way that we put the algorithm above the cause.
Right. It was like on a pedestal, like, what can we do? It was limiting, right? Because it's like, this is the thing, we can only go, this far.
Exactly. And we talk about that as like a key lesson in Pivot that I still don't, this one I haven't changed my mind over the 7 years since, is you need to like really kill all whatever sacred cows or purple, like, and start from like scratch and work backwards from what's the global optimum, not like what you've built and the stuff you've built recently. Like that is probably a death trap I think a lot of companies fall into. It's like, we spent all this time building, and that requires a different level of mentality and willingness to throw everything you spent 10,000 hours working on and sweating over, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that you're the third founder in this season so far. This is the 7th episode. That's said something like that. One raised a ton of money, laid off a third of his team, and realized 3 months later they should have laid off like 75% of his team. And the reason he kept them, he's like, because we had this business that was running and we thought we could run with it and have some cash flow. And he was just like, but like when we switched directions, like who wants to work on that business? And productivity dropped and we were distracted. I had that a little bit at like when I pivoted a few months ago. I was like, we had a particular product in the recruiting world, and I was like, oh my god, like we're building now, which is going to be in like a sales product. It's like, like one for one, because like almost like copy paste, like interface, how the users experience it.
Yeah.
And within like I feel fortunate. Within 3 weeks, I was like, oh no, like like we have to like just be willing to rip the Band-Aid off and throw away all this work we did before. And if there's something that maybe is transferable, great. But like, we should take solace in but I took solace in the fact that like we could not have gotten to this new idea without having built the old idea. Like it just never would have happened. But the particular technology, systems, interfaces, we had to start like from like first principles and be like, okay, what would our new user base, who is 100% different, want from this product?
Yep. That's exactly what I'm saying too. Same page of like, it's a real mental trap. The sunk cost fallacy, basically, is probably what they most would ascribe it to.
But you have, like you said, you have SeatGeek, which was not as big as it is now, but it was still a growing company, fast growing company. You have the golf channel. Do you remember the moment? It was a long time ago. Do you remember the moment when you were like, when you and Harrison looked at each other and were just like, it's just either it's just not working, or I just don't want to build a marketing automation startup. And then what happened from there? Like, did you call your investors? I guess you had the $250K from Nahal, right?
We had raised 1.75 now between that 250 and
okay, so you've raised money from investors. You have investors to really go to. And so what happens? Like, what was the trigger of that sort of discussion, if you remember?
It's like, Well, one is, I do remember we sold a $70,000 deal to Golf Channel. I went down to Florida, and I look back, and this isn't exactly your question, but just because you mentioned Golf Channel, I look back and be like, damn, I never thought I could sell anything in my life. Like, I never thought of myself as a salesperson. And I look back at the user interface, and the fact that they bought that piece of crap, I was like, man, I could actually sell. That's what I tell my parents. I was like, I never thought I could sell, but when I look back and it's like, if I was able to sell that thing.
Okay, but by the way, in the moment, were you like, I'm the man? Like, we have an awesome piece of software that Golf Channel just bought. Like, or is it only in retrospect that you said, wow, I can't believe I got them to buy, or that were buying that?
When I sold Golf Channel, now I don't know. Hopefully, I didn't say I'm the man. Maybe I did.
No, I'm saying in your head.
No, I know. No, I know. I'm just playing around. Like, hopefully, I didn't, but you never know. But what I did think is like, okay, I can honestly, like, I would say in a good way, I was very insecure being the only non-technical person. We had Harrison from MIT. We had recruited the valedictorian from MIT. We had another really math person from MIT. Like, we had another person like who now did a PhD from MIT, and then me, who can't code and not nearly as smart as folks. And yet somehow there's something they saw that it's worth taking a bet on me. And so when I closed that deal, I was like, okay, I can add. That made me feel most like I can add value and I can really contribute. So that's probably it was a monkey off my back because I really did not believe I had this innate selling ability. Yep. But to your point around the pivot, though, because we had Golf Channel, we had, say, 300K customers, when we had an acquisition offer from, not official, but like, this company sailed through, and I knew Neil Capel, who was the founder of it, and he's an advisor to us. He was like, hey, like, if you guys are going to maybe, if we're thinking about a partnership with them, they're like, maybe we'll buy this technology.
They're like New York-based startup in like email, right, and marketing automation, right?
And we're like the intelligence layer, plug in the pipes, the big phrase, those things. And it would have been maybe for like $1 million, maybe nothing. Like, who knows? Like, I'm not saying anything fancy there. And then we also like had some customers when we were telling we were pivoting, they were like, don't, like, one customer wanted to buy the technology. And I was like, you don't want to buy it, just trust me. like, you don't want to do this.
You're like, here's an intro to Braze, which was called Appboy, right? Like,
I was just like, like, you don't want to maintain this thing that we're doing because you don't know all the ugly stuff we're doing behind the scenes to even make it work. And so we had that, but so one was the algorithm, like the amount of like custom work. I was like, okay, this can't work. But it's a confluence of things. One is I was like, man, sales was very hard. It was a very good feedback loop for us. And I was like, why? Like, well, a combination of things. I remember watching the YouTube video with the founder of a company called AdMob that's Sequoia back that sold to Google for like 800 million. His name's Omar Hamoy. And he was saying something like what he would go through struggles, and then AdMob just took off. He was like, startups working when it feels like a boulder rolling down the hills, and then your job is to make sure it doesn't just like fall off course. And I was like, okay, that's definitely not our field. And then there was some other thing. I went to the SaaStr conference, and Jason Lumpkin's an investor now, and so he's very formative in thinking through these things. But at the SaaStr conference, there was a guy named Lou Cern who started New Relic, and he was talking, and there was something I forget now in hindsight exactly what it was. I just remember like being in the back listening. I was like, that seems like how it should feel. That's not how it feels. So what's the gap? And then the third thing is, and I don't know the exact sequence of how these things played out, but I remember these feelings. The third thing was,
by the way, the first two were similar, right? So like people said something that triggered a wait a second.
Yes,
it should feel different.
It should feel different. And then the third, I was like, I would do this exercise. Okay, like if I was a salesperson at Mixpanel, how would I sell Mixpanel? And I was like, I would be like, there's many people already trying to get analytics on their product. Now Mixpanel is a way better way to do it. I was like, what we're trying to sell is like this thing that people don't have time for. They're not trying to do today. They're doing all this other stuff. They're not spending time doing what these journey maps that we do through algorithms. So we're not making an easier way to do something they're already doing. We're telling them go do this new thing because it'll make you more money. But people don't seem to care about like they don't care about the vitamins or like, they don't care about just like getting better. They care about solving pains. And it's like a Mixpanel, like maybe they're like tapping into a really painful thing. They're not just selling a positive. And we're kind of selling this like vitamin, this thing like you need Salesforce, you need your email service provider. This intelligence thing is like, if someone who's really tech forward and innovative wants to mess around with, they'll go do this thing. And so I just remember that feeling of like, yeah, this is a nice to have, and it's not tapping into a core like
by the way, that
painful
was
thing.
Exactly what I felt about our first version of Draftboard. Just like
Yeah.
I didn't know what a yes looked like until I started getting feedback on, the product we're launching now, like the new product. Like, because people were like, well, here's my credit card. How can I sign up? I want to be in the first cohort. And like, not to like it's not about me, but I'm saying like in our first version of Draftboard, we got like 100 companies to like onboard to this recruiting product.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, those weren't like hell yeses. Literally, people would be like, yeah, sure, we'll give it a shot. Why not? And I didn't know to recognize that was a negative signal. I was like, oh, like another company, like we're growing from 10 to 50 to 100. And, we weren't selling a piece of software. And even worse, it was free. And so like, they weren't like, hell yes on a free product. They were like, sure, we'll give it a shot. We'll give it a chance. And like, it just, one of my investors, Amanda at Founder Collective, was just like, are you sure you're a need to have and not a nice to have? And she had said that early on, that she said it differently. She said, you need to make sure you're a need to have, not a nice to have. And it just always stuck with me. And when once I realized that we were a nice to have, there was just sort of no going back to thinking it could get better.
Yeah. And that there is a nuance there too of like what really is a need to have. Like almost 99% of success, like Braze a need to have because they've stuck with the responses. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so there's a nuance there.
Right. But it goes to your point about like, are you solving a problem they have today? Are you selling them on a vision of something that could be better, but that isn't currently a problem, right? Like everything could be optimized or better, but if it's not like the vitamin versus painkiller thing, right? Like if it's unless your product is so transformational that it's going to 2x their revenue, right? Or like have their spending some, it's a hard sell.
Well, yeah, that's why. That's how I definitely thought about it. My evolution of what's vitamin, painkiller, need to have, nice to have. They're far blurrier than how I even like. I would talk about it very much that way. But to your point, what I'm kind of calling out even more is like people seem to care more about solving pain than like positives. And so like whether it's you could still be solving a pain and be a nice to have, but like at least go for a pain. Because it's like there's like solve a pain, then there's like nice to have and need to have. That's
it's the classic like economic and psychological finding, or it seems related to like risk aversion, right?
Yeah,
right. Like
exactly, or fear of losing versus the benefit of gaining.
Exactly.
I think it's very much aligned with that.
Okay, so you have all these realizations. Do you and like how do you raise it with Harrison? Is he having the same things at the same time?
I don't know if he was having as much doubt in that. I would need to double check. I'm sure he was having some, like, it wasn't like we were like, ripping, but we did have some success. We're like, oh, but it was a golf channel. This is cool. And I don't, this is going back to a place where I don't remember the specifics of the sequence, but, we were a small team of 4 and it was pretty much dead set in my mind we needed to change. Like, it wasn't a hard decision to me in that sense of like, we can't be people ask me like that a hard decision. I was like, no, it just felt very certain we were going to die if we stayed on the current path. So like,
but it wasn't immediate. So just to be clear, you didn't immediately get to that point, right? But once you got there, it was there's no going back, right? I assume maybe it was a matter of a month or 3 months or something where like you heard this guy say something at Jason say something at SaaStr.
Yeah, I was doing it for some period of time for sure. Yeah, I'm sure like, probably every sales conversation, I'm just like adjusting. Like every time I'm not selling, I was like trying to learn and read.
You're pattern matching.
I'm pattern matching, yeah. And so, I remember just like, but I told this story in one of those prior conversations, but basically it was me, Harrison, Matt, this guy, Tyler, this guy, Ricky, and this guy, she's still with us. I don't know why I blanked on his name. Most important person.
Sorry.
But what's it called? It was so easy. Honestly, like it was a sign of such an incredible team because they were just like, okay. And we were like, we can either give up or try again. And we were all, maybe to some degree, I moved through it so fast, they didn't have the option to give up. But in general, it was just a very resilient, sturdy team. And we just said, move forward. Now, there was some debate. Should we stick with it? Some of this is working. And it's funny, like, it depends where in the conversation we want to dig into this. But, say 2 years after we pivoted, we're under this new MaestroQA thing and that started working. We would reflect back and be, remember when we thought we should stay? in that prior idea. And we would look at it and be like, wow, that would have been the wrong route. But it actually wasn't. It could have been equally a good route. It just kind of came down to like conviction and vision and what you're going to make work, because that route equally could have worked too. Like, it wasn't a bad idea. It was just a bad aim for that idea and market at that moment in time. Because again, Braze wasn't blowing up by then. Like Iterable, I don't even know was launched by then. Like Iterable might have launched that year. Like it was, and clearly there's something there, right?
Right. But that's why people talk about founder product market fit, right? And maybe it's founder team product market fit, right? If your heart's not in it, then there's no way you'll be able to build a big business.
Your heart can be in it, but your heart can be in a lot of things when you're so passionate. Like my heart was in selling it to Golf Channel. You can convince things, but it's just skill. It's not just heart. It's also skill. Heart matters. I'm not saying it doesn't. Like, heart's key. It's also just skill. Like, can you see the angles? Can you see the opportunity? Can you dissect?
Oh, interesting.
Like, I just need to extend from intelligence and build a pipe. And I think I could build a better ESP than, the problems with a MailChimp in the market versus a response to the market, and why I can build a way better experience. Like there's skill, and could have figured it out too. And I didn't have the skill and the heart and the vision and the understanding.
I want to press in on that. When you say skill, do you mean you didn't have the domain knowledge? What do you mean by skill? Like, clearly you're a smart guy. Clearly your team is smart also, like super smart, right? Like when you say, like, I'm trying to, like, because you could have learned anything. Like you said, you learned the ad tech ecosystem, which is super complicated.
Yeah. What I mean is, I don't know how I was thinking back then exactly like this, like, but it definitely wasn't what I would do if I was in that exact same situation. And I was like, I really want to make it work in marketing. I would have just done a ton of customer discovery on, been like, how did, like, walk me through your email system, how did it connect to this system. Like, I would have gotten really close, and I would have became, not a domain is so high level. Like, I would have been like on the expert of what's really happening on the ground. And we ended up doing with this QA thing, we could have done that more. We could have gone deeper into the details of discovery and product development and figured something out for sure. I think to some degree, I looked at the marketing thing from a MBA, or, to no disrespect from an MBA standpoint, but like from a management consultant type of lens is what I'm trying to say. Oh, well, this market's really competitive. There's a million ESPs. And I disregarded it from there. But that's like why obviously that was wrong. There were still so many big companies. Like, what happened to Klaviyo? Like, you could have built a Klaviyo in that period of time. Like, you didn't have it to figure it out. It's like too hard. It's not just hard. It's like more.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. Where you could say, okay, I'm having some signals that are ambiguous, or is that the right word? Yeah, ambiguous signals, like some positive, like Golf Channel, and then other negative ones. And then I start thinking about it. I put my, management consulting, like, what's the TAM and what's the exit possibilities hat on, and you can kind of convince yourself of the negatives, right? You can kind of, it's interesting. Like, I wonder if I could talk to Vasu, 7 years ago, Vasu, or whenever it was, like, what made you be like, we have to just pivot? Anyways, but we spent enough time on the there.
No,
I think that's
that's one of those. Yeah, I look back and be like, oh wow, like,
I just don't want to badger you. Like, it's fascinating to me.
No, I don't find it badgering. Like, I look at it like, because, part of when we were prepping for this, what I was saying is, like, to me, what's very interesting about this discussion from my lens is, like, clearly we learned some right lessons. But if I thought I learned 10 right lessons, I'm trying to fit on the screen, 10 right lessons.
Yeah.
Say the pivot was 2016. If you asked me in 2018, I had these 10 right lessons. And then you asked me in 2020, I'd say I'd have these 10 right lessons. And now I'm like, oh, wait, these 5 were really right, and these 3 were really wrong. And that's part of it. Like, you get part of it right and you get part of it wrong. You're never going to get them all right. But so when I look back at it, I'm like, oh, wait, there were some really critical things that we thought we got wrong, even from the ad trip days, that were so critical to even making the MaestroQA things. Like, for example, I would have never been able to attract someone like Harrison with the MaestroQA idea.
It was the algorithm. It was the sort of like, yeah, that was
technical. It was interesting. It was cutting edge. It was very innovative. And like, that wasn't intentional. I like this and it all in cap. So it wasn't like a program part of my continuous playbook because it just was part of it. So you look back, there's no way I could have attracted someone like him. And then him to attract these other folks from MIT, they all love the algorithm. They're all mathy, PhD, computer sciencey type people. Like, there's no way. So like, maybe that first idea was the most important lesson. Because if you say it's all about great people and these people are incredible for a company, they're not all here with us anymore, but like, they are the most important people. The ones that are here are the most important. So like, was that even a mistake? No. Like, and I don't, but like, you look back, you're like, oh wow, that was such a mistake. But it's okay. Like, you learn through mistakes. But actually, wait, the very first idea that was the least successful commercially was the most important to today's success.
Correct.
So what is a pivot and what is, it's like, that's sort of those things I start to really rethink and really try and program one of the right lessons.
Also, yeah, you've been doing this now for over 10 years working with Harrison on this, what became MaestroQA. And so you have this sort of perspective to look back.
Yeah. Like they often say, like in many things, you can't run two simulations at once. Right. And so you don't really know what the alternative is. But I think obviously it's not exactly because it's one linear journey, but we are able to somehow reflect on like, oh, wow, we do have like we can see the before and after and have two different versions of things, right. and pick up on some of those type of experiments.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back to, you decide it's not working, the team's aligned. What do you do next? Like, how do you end up building a tool for quality assurance? Like, do you like pause everything? I mean, maybe actually before we even get to that, well, maybe it's related. What did you tell your investors? You've raised almost $2 million at this point. Do you remember saying something to them?
I don't remember too much, to be honest. I do remember like probably told Nahal just like, hey, we're going to do this. But I do remember, and I told Nahal this, like, if they asked for their money back, I would have told them to F off. Like, it was my money. Like, I know others I've been listening, like, would say they'd give it back, but it's like, no, I know I'm just a lottery for you guys. Like, you do this 100 times. Like, this is, as long as I'm giving it my all, like, it's my money now. And
by the way, that is a very, I think, mature take to have, as that you were a 23 or 24 or 25-year-old, maybe something like that. Like, I think people take time to get to that point where, like, this is a business. They took a bet on me, and they're stuck with me, kind of, right?
Yeah. Well, that doesn't mean I think I am very like, and I was just like to defend it as much as like, you do want to be respectful of that. You do want to be
for sure. We're both sort of taking like the extreme a little bit position here, like sort of hyperbolic position. But like it is like when I went to my investors, I was fortunate. They were like, one of them put it this way, like building a startup is like wandering in the oasis. Okay, you thought
I'm gonna drink a Smurf while we talk.
Like, please, that's hilarious. I've never seen a legitimately blue drink like that.
It's the bluest drink I've ever seen.
Reminds me of Uncle Owen's milk from Star Wars. But they said it's like a wandering in the oasis. You think you see where or wandering in the desert. You think you found the oasis. It's not there. You have to keep wandering and looking for it. And I think the good investors understand that they invested in you and they invested in the team. And the idea, almost in many cases, because so many startups pivot, is not going to end up exactly the way you intended.
Yeah, we lost more credibility, rightfully so, to get pivoted many times between that final one, And so, and I looking back, there's low credit. We were flailing and we were changing ideas of boom, 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 boom. So it wasn't, they had every reason to not have faith, but I still was like, as long as we're going to put all our effort in, then
right.
We can't, like, if we were going to sandbag it, then for sure, then we screwed them over, but we're trying our hardest, then we're part of, we're part of the numbers.
So then what was the process of getting to what became MaestroQA? Like,
one was
the tool.
Yeah, well, it ended up being the exact right formula for that moment in time, but it does have many flaws into it that we've realized over later too, which I'll be talking about. But Formula One was, okay, what's the number one reason we failed? We built something no one wanted. So what are we going to do this time? What's the number two? Why did we do that? Well, we started with this technology in search of a problem. And so we don't want to make that mistake anymore again. three, where we don't care if this idea is selling trash bags or using this algorithm. Like, it's going to be all about the problem first. We're not going to pigeonhole to our prior points, the idea to the algorithm. We had another rule like 4, which is like, let's not chase shiny, interesting technology ideas like the things that our team gravitate towards. Let's focus on solving a problem. So like we put a whole bunch of things of like how we're going to be more market first than product first and so we're not going to repeat that same mistake again. And then it was like, I was like, okay. And the pattern I'm seeing from these other companies that product market fit is typically if someone cares about the problem, they're spending time doing it. Like somehow they're hacking it together. So we want to find a heuristic, like not words, but action. There are people saying, like showing, they can say they don't care about something, but if I shadow them for a week and they're doing all the things that are related to the problem we're solving, that's what I'm paying attention to. So we got observation focus versus
like revealed preference versus stated preference. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we had these things and basically I was like, okay. And then we had this one little thing where this was pretty prescient. We're like, the machine learning stuff we did was in numbers. It was based on this website data. It was a bunch of like numerical machine learning analysis. And we did feel back then, like, why don't we go to places where conversations are more the heart of the function? And because in the future, like there could be some interesting NLP things that we could tap into and that level of data, but we don't want to build any NLP right now because that would be repeating the mistake. But like maybe like conversations are more untapped than numbers in terms of like analysis, right.
So the idea there is that like numbers don't have a moat necessarily. Like anyone can take numbers and do interesting things with them, but conversations are much harder. They're unstructured. And maybe there's something around that we can do something with. Maybe not even
harder. Like it wasn't as much as like a bunch of companies. Like it wasn't like everyone was talking about machine learning back then, but like I remember Excel. Like people were talking about the intelligent apps back then. Excel had a thesis on it. They invested in a company called Relate IQ. There was Infer, which was like doing machine learning on lead scoring, and people were thinking, sales was thinking, how do you do machine learning A/B test optimizations? Like Optimizely was thinking that, like people were talking about that on numbers, like how do we do all sorts of optimizations and multivariate testing and things of that nature. And so it was just like, let's get away from that. This language and text seem way just less talked about right now,
right,
in terms of like what ideas we're going after. So like that ended up being subtly very great for us for obvious reasons now, right? And so those were some of the rules. And then what I did is I would cold email a bunch of folks, cold LinkedIn them, and I'd just say like, this is what I was like, man, now that golf thing made me like, oh, I can sell, but I was like lucky. This made me feel really good about where some of my superpowers are. I just would I said, I'm going to go after customer success, study it, sales, study it, account management, study it, support, study it, and by study it, I would just email, hey, my name is Vasu. We had this idea, it didn't work. This was the mistake we made. I don't want to make the mistake again. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to meet folks who are doing this type of job. And I just want to ask about, I have no idea, no product to sell you right now. I just want to ask some questions to figure out if there's a real problem to solve or not. And that, I was like, just like you said, I got a ton of movement. I got 50, 60, 70 conversations. And then I would take everything and I would document. The question I'd ask is like, well, first, before I ask about, I have no product idea. Tell me about your job. How does it work? Who do you report to? So, because I started to realize companies don't buy, it's like people buy products at companies, but it's kind of like their needs and pain points are related to the org structure. So like, okay, let me start with the higher level context before I get into like, tell me about how you do forecasting. Like, first off, are you a rep? Are you a manager? Who does what? Boom, boom. How does your role fit in? So and then after 100 of these conversations, I had these like architecture papers at home where I would like blueprint out and I could see these different patterns. And
what kind of patterns did you note? I mean, this is fascinating. What did you see? Like, give me an example of like a pattern you saw.
So one is a really important insight is I paid attention to like org structures and said two people are the VP of support, but they're wildly different org structures. For example, one reports into sales, or one reports into marketing, or one reports into ops, or one has a BPO, one doesn't have a BPO. You need to analyze their pains. You do differently. You have to almost, if you clump all three VPs of support into one persona, you might get bad data or insights as to what the patterns are. So you actually got to try and get like the right level of segmentations to properly assess if one person says it's a pain versus, and then the other doesn't, like why. Maybe it's related to org structure, for example. So like that's one thing, is we get a sense of like, whose words should we like look together as a pattern versus not. And then patterns would be like, I'd have a pie chart. Give me a pie chart of how you spend your time. And so like, boom. So I look at management, this thing, that thing. And then I'd be like, okay, what do you like, walk me through the tool you use in each of those times. So I started to get a sense of like pain points, and that had repeatability to it. And we uncovered a couple things. And one was like closer to like voice of customer stuff. But this QA problem was like, we saw many people using spreadsheets. They were spending 40 hours a week, dedicated people to do the role. And that was like, okay, it meets the criteria. They're spending time on it. They are often using spreadsheets. There's patterns across people. And I understand the pain point. And that's what showed us the problem. Now,
did you have other competing problems that you had to choose between like this QA solution and something else in sales, or like, and how did you make that decision?
We ended up getting into support, and again, maybe a little bit incorrectly, luckily, like we used the management consultant type of thing, where it's like, sales is too competitive, which is somewhat true. Like everyone's building freaking sales tools. Like we don't want to be another one of those. Like support was a little less sexy. And then marketing, everyone was doing something, and customer success, we couldn't find much pain points. So we found a couple ideas in support. And I think it's hard for me to remember, but I think one was like triage, like automated tagging, like, hey, all these support tickets come in, humans tag them. Can you like automatically tag it? But we're like, we want to do things. That seems too complex. We're going to go down this like crazy machine learning problem, and we're going to end up with the same problem as last time, where every customer needs different algorithms. Like, so we didn't like that problem. But the real thing is, we got these 4 or 5 folks from MIT, and I'm telling them, hey, listen, there's this problem. They're using these spreadsheets, and they're going back and forth between Zendesk and spreadsheets. And this is another great lesson that still I hold true, is like, that hasn't changed on that list of 10. We were just like, I remember one guy going like, why don't they just buy a second monitor? And I was like, fuck, like that's not a.
You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of the Juicero thing. Remember like that juicer, like the Silicon Valley juicer, they sold for like $500, and it squeezed this packet of a smoothie as you're drinking a smoothie. And then the Bloomberg reporter and the Bloomberg reporter opened up like in there, like, reporting on it, was like, let me see if I squeeze it by hand, if it'll work just as well. And it did. And it killed the business like overnight, because it was like the whole model was, you need this machine that put 4 tons of force on these packages. And then the reporter was like, they literally did a side by side, squeezing my hand in the machine. Hilarious. It was the exact same thing. And it feels like your colleague was just like, but they could just buy another screen.
That's a great point. And honestly, like if we probably said, hey, why don't we buy them a second monitor and see if that works just as well? Like that could have killed the idea for real.
Oh my God. And like, amazing.
There is, there's many lessons from that. One is like, it's very easy to over intellectualize, and it's like, they do this thing, like, let's go build it. And like, people love this, like putting it all on one screen and not having to go to separate screens. And so it ended up working amazingly well. We built it. We had 3 first beta customers that we said, if this works, give us $5 a month per agent. Blue Apron, Bonobos, and Harry's. And
great brands to start with.
Yeah, they're great brands. And like brands, like they're in New York City, we'd go to them every day, and we'd like shadow and like very rapidly iterate. Great brands, also misleading brands in the sense of like, VC, very VC funded, very hyped up in that particular market time. Like, I think 2 of the 3 don't exist anymore, or they don't exist, but like significantly shorter.
I didn't say great businesses. I said great brands.
No, and I agree. They're amazing brands, and we owe everything to them. Like, it's but there's a lesson there too around who you attract. There's like looking back, you're like, okay, there is a signal there that we didn't pay attention to.
What do you mean?
So I'll come back to that in a second. But the other thing, so they end up loving it, and then we get all these inbounds, Credit Karma, MailChimp, people just come to us. But the other thing is,
because by the way, the inbounds because people heard from like through the grapevine, like, oh, we're using this tool, or what, or
is the perfect situation where no one cared about this QA problem. We're the first person doing it with our Zendesk integration in the App Store. And like anyone who Googled QA software to get off spreadsheets would find really only us. So it was like this amazing thing of like, it was a small enough idea, but there wasn't a lot of competition, which is exactly what we wanted. And we were the only game in town, and we had a good enough product to bring people in.
Wait,
and
okay, finish. And then I want to go back a second. We can finish, yeah.
The reason we thought the product was a good idea is it made people do the QA process faster, because we put something that was in 3 different systems into one tool. And our whole identity, and again, it works. It worked for reasons we didn't really fully understand, was about our whole product has to be about making grading faster. And now as we think about our next journey, our next leg of the journey, that was the wrong hypothesis. That's not why people really bought it. And that's not the most important reason they should buy it. And we have to almost redesign and rethink through the product around it. We thought the whole thing was about grading faster in a side-by-side view.
Can you just, for everyone and for me, define what grading is?
Oh, sorry. Like in the quality assurance process, you're like reading a customer conversation and then you're rating it on a scorecard or a rubric type of thing.
And so a support person has a conversation, either text or voice, and then someone's literally like tagging it, like grading or tagging, or both.
Call it more like grading. It's like a set of questions, like did they give the right resolution? How was the empathy? And like leaving feedbacks. It was all like that process that they were doing in a Google form here and then Zendesk here. And that whole process is not the most important reason why people buy today or will buy going forward. And we almost got the value prop as to why people are buying our product, the core thing, wrong for so many years.
But it was a good enough product that it didn't matter for a long time. But it sounds like now it's starting to matter.
It mattered always, but it wasn't existential always. Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Yeah, that's,
you know what I mean?
That's
like,
a great way to put it.
Like we could have gone from here if we knew earlier. We could have if our trajectory was like this, it could have been like this.
Right. For those listening, he's like gradients with different slopes, and the second one was much steeper.
Yeah, like this. And so, but to your point around like your prior point around like there was signal in that,
right, from Harry's and I forget the other ones you mentioned, but yeah, Bonobos. You said there was some negative or some signal that you should have realized from that.
Just that you can get away with like the business case for Maestro. Going back to the nice to have to need to have thing. Okay, people are spending $100 on this process. If we 2x the time it takes to do the process, we save them $50. Okay, so there's clearly economic value of what we do. But what we don't do enough, and I think a lot of startups struggle with this, is, well, how bad would it be if they just eliminated the process? Like, how amazing is the process even right now? Like, and so like, would that cost them money? Like, any more money than that? Then, like, would anyone notice if that process just disappeared? What is why does the CFO care about it? How does it tie to like their much larger strategic goals of differentiation and long-term sustainability? And like, now most software can't fully impact this. We have no ability to affect any of those, like, and when you're more VC backed and you're more VC backed, you're spending money a little bit more loosely. And that was the time, like, I guess that's 2017, 2018, 2019. Like, you don't really know how good what you're doing is either until you saw the old industries, like more traditional ones, like someone's been around for a long time, or they're buying you like the times of 2022 and 2023, like, or 2024, when there's like real, like, not a lot of excess budget. And so like revenue and customers can be very misleading from the core truth. Now, we're so fortunate because it got us started.
Right. You're saying this is sort of the danger of a lot of startups that over the last 5-6 years, especially from like 2017 to 2022, sold into startups, that there was maybe some like improper understanding of the strength of their business or the trajectory of their business, because there was so much money flowing through the system into startups that weren't thinking critically about how they were spending money. Is that sort of the way that to understand it, or am I getting it wrong?
Yeah, it's that. And then also, like, there were a lot of experimental companies and startups that aren't real business models yet, right? So like, you just have to like not discount it to zero. You just have to take a different lens on what that is. Like, yeah, it's unclear. The whole thing is an experiment. You're selling a new product to a totally experimental idea, like selling, what is the category for Blue Apron? Like home delivery food,
right?
Like whatever that category that is, it's like that whole thing's an experiment. So like you're within an experiment, basically. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
and you're levered, and you're like hyper levered. If all you do is sell to startups, you're hyper levered to and exposed to that startup industry, essentially venture capital dollars.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to like then what we were saying earlier. Like when I started in 2013, startups weren't as much a thing, and then obviously exploded. And as the TAM of SaaS and technology got so big, people were buying all sorts of, like, when you probably sold software 30 years ago, like people were buying one piece of software a year, maybe, or 2 years. Like sales was probably a much higher signal 20 years ago than it is in the last 5 to 7 years. And so that's like a little bit of like, now again, we did have a plan to just get our foot in the door. We'll figure out more problems to solve. But sales, when you pivot and you start to get sales, that's some signal, but it's not. It can be very misleading, or you get the wrong tea leaves, and you don't want to. It doesn't matter as much as it used to getting to $1 million in terms of product market fit.
Yes, although I think something you said also resonates with me, which is when you're pivoting, and even when you're starting, like your business is to like live to fight another day. You have to like, how are we going to build this business for 6 months from now, or a year from now, even 2 years from now? It's probably too far in many cases to think, right? Like you obviously want to have a strategic plan, right? You have your vision, but you have to be like, what is like strong opinions weekly held or something, or strong convictions weekly held, because you just have to know that you're going to go where the market tells you to go. And so, I think you can like want to be very forward thinking, but also recognizing that I have to do what I have to do today to build the business. And then like, when the article that I saw you when you raised your Series A in 2021, $25 million, and it said you were profitable. And I don't know how you measure profitability, or I don't know how anyone measures profitability now in those days. But like that gives you a lot of breathing room, even if by some measure, to be the architect of your own destiny and say, wait, okay, even like you were just saying, like now you've sort of realized we had a great product, but we were selling it with the wrong understanding of why people were buying it. And now it gives you, when you have cushion, like in a real business that's operating and still solving a problem, you could say, okay, well, now what do we need to do to build 5-10 years into the future?
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, and maybe, like that was our mindset. Like we just got to like make money and survive, like that one. And that, so I do think like we got it. The goal, like we clearly didn't get it so wrong, right? Like we got it very right in the most important ways. But we thought because we got it right and it was working, we got it all right. And my point is more like, actually, we got a lot of it wrong that if we knew earlier, we could have taken this, I could have just way inflected the slope. But then it kind of comes back to a question that needs to be stewed on, which is like, okay, so we got to just survive. We got to just get our foot in the door. But then what is the purpose someone is doing at this startup? Like, what is the point of all of this too? And so like, the reason I bring that is like, if you just pivot to make money, like that's great. But like, we didn't have a grander vision because we thought we were the biggest lesson from the pivot before we took such a visionary leap. Now we got to we need fast feedback loops from the customers. So we went from hyper visionary, hyper risky, to incredibly risk averse, but making money. So that begs a much more interesting question of like, what is the fucking point of all this? Like, and so what, like,
right? Because when you started, it was like we have these awesome MIT engineers who are just really freaking excited about this awesome algorithm. We're going to build something around. Like, that's a cool vision to build around. And so now,
like I remember, exactly. And like now it's a real business, and like you want both. Like, but you do need both. Like, it's not like you can have one or the other.
Yep.
But there's a lot of these pivots like are measured often by these financial successes or like early financial feedback, but that's probably wrong. It depending on your goals. Now, if your goal is to build a lifestyle business and sell it and then sell it for $10 million or $5 million or $30 million, or it depends on now what is your point, what is your why behind doing this?
Right.
But these pivots, that we lost all vision and risk seeking, and we got very like, what's the customer want? What's the customer want? What's the customer want? And that's not great either. Like, you're not going to attract great people that way either. And
what's your core company ethos and story that you tell each other? You kind of lose that if it's all about the transactional nature. One of the guys I interviewed, this guy Oren, the founder of Fondue, he said, we thought we were being realists when we started the company, and like we were like, our first company principle is we want to buy an island, like, together, right? Like, that was like, he's like, I want everyone to feel so incentivized to make so much money that we can buy an island together. And he's like, when we had to pivot, like, we realized the downside of that, right? Is that like some people came here for the mercenary reason to make money. And he's like, yes, everyone wants to make money at startups. It's one of the attractions of it. But he's like, it should have been one of, not the primary, not the first thing in our list of things. Because he's like, it felt like it distorted some of the ways we thought about the pivot or what we did afterwards. Even though they had a successful pivot and a successful exit, he's like, looking back, he's like, that shouldn't have been our number one. Maybe it should have been number 3 or 4.
Yeah. Well, what's connected out between that, what I was saying, actually? How did that connect?
Meaning that you said it felt like you went from this like vision in the beginning, where everyone was excited about the technology. And then when you pivoted, you're like, we just need to like do what the customer wants so we can build a business and make money. And it's like, if all you're doing is optimization to make the next sale, you lose that like that thread that keeps everyone excited and like in it for the long term.
Yeah. I see. And like their long-term thing was like a much bigger like monetary outcome.
Well, and monetary, it was transactional. Like you were saying, it was transactional. And he's like, we didn't have that thing, that like excitement or that vision.
Did they bring it back? Did they bring it back, or it was too late?
No, they managed to pivot, and they actually pivoted, and they pivoted and they sold the business like 9-10 months after they pivoted. And he said, we did fine. Like, was it a fantastic out for investors? No, but they made their money back, made a little bit more. I think they did. Yeah. And he's like, we did fine. We sold the business, a successful outcome. He's like, but if we had something motivating us beyond the transactional nature, he's like, maybe we would have taken that extra month or two when we were trying to figure out what to do next. And we would have had some guiding principle to like, that would have helped us decide on what to do next, rather than like, what's the closest thing that we can do, that we know how to do with our skill set to be able to build a new business. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah, I see. And like, so it kind of begs the question, like, what is a successful pivot? Like, that, my point on it all is like, the definitions seem wrong then as what's out there. So like, I guess based on your conversations, like, or your own personal point of view, like, how do you think most people or yourself define what a good pivot versus a bad pivot looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to a founder who pivoted his business, built a company with $500,000 ARR very quickly, and then he and his co-founders looked at each other and they're just like, we don't believe in this. They literally they did the management consulting math. They're like, the chance that this can sell for $100 million or more, and I own 10%, and like my expected value is this, and meanwhile I can go be a VP of product in some company and make XYZ money. He was just like, that's the math I did, and he was like uber or hyper realist about it, right?
Yeah.
Or rational.
So
that's how he defined. Like, even though they had their investors were like, why are you giving up?
Pivot.
I actually don't. Part of the reason that I'm interested in these conversations is because I don't know, like you, I don't know what a successful pivot. I think, again,
did he consider it? did he consider an unsuccessful pivot? Or did you guys not cover that?
That's a good question. Maybe I should have him on the podcast.
That's a really good question. He hasn't been on yet. Oh yeah,
hasn't been on yet. This has just came up in sort of random conversation. I don't know. It may. I can see it going both ways. He might say, look, it was unsuccessful because we ultimately couldn't see this being a rocket ship, whether right or wrong, right? Maybe it was their Braze moment with you, or it could have been, but you never know. Or I could see him saying, you know what, like it was successful because we changed gears, we built a whole new product, we built 500,000 of revenue, and we realized it wasn't what we wanted, and that's a success in its own right.
The heart of my point is like, as well, or not the heart, but I would still double down. Like, I'm thankful that we took the approach we did, because the key mistake we didn't make is I hear this from founders that are trying to sell their company now. It's not going multiple I can think of. They're like, I don't see us to be $100 million company or $1 billion company. And in that example that you gave, and I think that's generally a terrible way to try and figure it out. Like, I think it's terrible, because like most people can't see it. Like you're not that good probably anyways. Like you know what I mean? Like I'm not that good, but like, because we then stayed with this thing for 6 years, and we got hundreds of customers, you do need longevity and nuance to connect new visionary dots. So the point out, how do you have both? Sometimes you just need to get in the game and talk to customers and think about a problem for a decade before you see the big sight. Like, just because you don't see it now doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There's many things in my life that exist that I don't see, like air.
I like that. So
the goal, the lesson I'd tell myself though is like, you got burned so badly on that first idea, and you rotated in a certain way to survive, but don't hold on to that lesson forever. And
don't over-rotate. And don't persist forever. Yeah.
And you don't know when you might need to tap back into the vision side, but that also got you there. And how do you just need to, everyone has a different formula, but you need both. And how that vision side comes back in your business, you need it, or you should sell the company at a point where it's kind of capping out, but you need it. And you had it, and that's what got you started. And it led to Harrison, and it led to these folks, and it led to even nothing. And that's whatever, I learned it now, and I'm going to apply going forward. But that's one of the things I'm like, damn, that is not how I interpreted that pivot fully until the last 2-ish years. And so it's just funny how you learn and relearn and correct lessons you think are from a prior mistake. So I think that's my favorite probably takeaway from the pivot.
And now you guys are where? Like, where are you in your journey?
I would say, well, there's many ways to answer that question. So let me think about a good way to answer
maybe in the
question.
Context of this conversation of, clearly, or based on what we've talked about, I think it's been a very successful pivot from marketing automation to, software for QA.
Maybe if I picked Flavia, I'd be a $10 billion company right now.
Right. I guess, but this all goes back to what is success in pivots, right? There's a whole philosophical element to it. But when you look, let me ask it this way: like, when you look forward, do you say, yeah, we've got more pivots in our future because either we need to now, or because that's the nature of business, that you're always pivoting, and if you're not, then you're doing something wrong. Like, now that you have 10 years experience.
That's a little bit closer. Like, what I don't get is like, if you're not pivoting, you're dying. Like, another way of saying it is, if you're not, there's that Peter Thiel, Mark Zuckerberg conversation dialogue where he says the only constant is change. Like, if you're not prepared, like, isn't meta pivoting? Then it's pivoted virtual reality and out of AI, and so there is that whole, like, as you kind of go through the series, like, from my understanding, it's like pivots are this hard thing. People don't like talking about them, and like that's kind of, and like pivots are often, you get to success ideas, but I have a very different perspective and branding on like what, like, you should be pivoting, and you should be your pivots, and then you should know what is a good pivot versus not a good pivot. Your pivots shouldn't be based on like a revenue milestone, but a unique insight you've developed over X, Y, and Z that you're then enacting on to take something to the next level. And so, yeah, I think we're going through our next big transformation. We do, I said it's a little north of 20 million in revenue, but
that's awesome.
the ceiling, the pivots should take and I wouldn't say this is true, but in many ways this is wrong about our prior pivots based on conventional definition. It should take the ceiling, if this is the floor and this is the ceiling of the current idea, pivot should be in your on this trajectory, some insight that lets you hit a totally different new ceiling. And you should be constantly pivoting, like climbing a staircase in that sense, while you're climbing the staircase of your current idea. And if you're doing it right, you're constantly unlocking new insights and learnings about the world and your customers and your self-confidence around how much, we wouldn't have the ability to, this next pivot and vision we have, which is much broader than customer support QA. I don't think we would have had the confidence and the right to even go for a much bigger vision ago. So you should be pivoting and rethinking and reinventing every 5 years and you should be continuously thinking about that as a founder. And so, yeah, it's much better than it's always branded as a pretty positive thing, like pivots. Like I don't think it has a negative stigma, but
you know, it's funny,
be encouraged.
I agree. When I posted about our pivot on LinkedIn, I sort of posted I was open kimono because my view was I brought these people, I tried to build a following LinkedIn, whatever, not that many, whatever. People were along for the journey of what the V1 of DraftBoard was. And I was like, I should tell them we've decided to pivot and tell them the reasons why, because they've heard me talk about the good things. Let me tell them the bad things. And one of my investors sent me a text message of another random investor that sent to him that said, do you get tired of Zach shitting on the idea that you funded every day? Because I was like, here's what we got wrong.
What?
Do you get tired of Zach shitting on the idea that you funded every day, constantly? And I was like he wasn't upset with me. He was just like, isn't it hilarious? Like, this person said this. And I was like, it's just so funny because for me, like you said, I'm like, okay, what do you want me to pursue a bad idea just because you funded it? Like that would be idiotic, right? Or you want me to do something that I don't believe in just because I sold some people a vision, that I believed in and that they believed in, and I should just pursue it. No, the idea of the pivot is that you see something's not working. We have to be just real about what is and isn't possible. And it was just shocking to me that a VC, and I don't know who it was, doesn't really matter, would have that perspective, right? I think part of it is the VC world is so reputation focused and so aren't you concerned that him shitting on the business he built that you funded might reflect on your capabilities as a VC? But I don't know, if I would like to think if I was a VC and someone was like, here's all the things I got wrong, I'd be like, fucking A, that guy's being honest, and that's going to make him build a better thing next. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, there's obviously truth to what you're saying. I don't know. I haven't seen that text, but I would say if I was to be, I think I don't fully agree with the point you're making, but it's not exactly the point you're making, but I would shit on someone's decision to pivot if it's done a certain way, because so just to play both sides,
yeah,
I don't think most people pivot well. And so they might say, I really recall this or that, but is it true? I can think of many conversations. People say that I don't see a path to 100 million AR. To me, that's just dumb. And you should get shit on for that. That's just dumb. That question is even your ego and hubris to even make it a decision point. Or how persistent were you with the current idea? How whimsical? I would say as we say, we pivoted 7 times. I think I should have been shit on 3 or 4 of those times, the way I did it, versus 2 of them, or 1 of them, I think I did really
right. So the reasons for pivoting are actually really critical in understanding whether you're making the right decision or not.
They're not even logical reasons. They're mental, the heart, how persistent was he? How all out? How brutally self-critical was this person? It's not a logic. I would assess it less of anyone who's raised venture money or do these startups, they're smart enough. They're smart enough to logic anything out. I'd have to read your things and I have to grill you and be to really sense it and be is this, because me pivoting out of the whole market automation thing wasn't because the idea was bad. It was because I was bad. And I didn't realize it in the moment type of thing. And so it is quite people should be critical of people pivoting, if they have the right, if they know how to like properly, and So I'm not saying I don't know. I don't know. I didn't read your post.
I think I agree. I agree with you. I 100% agree with that. I think also what's been exposed over the last 2 years is that there were a lot of people building startups who were tourists, right?
Yes.
That it was easy to raise money. Everyone an idea got funded. I mean, I talked to a VC at a major firm 4 years ago. We were at some random social event, and I was like, you guys are deploying like $50 million a week. Like, it can't be that there's this many qualified founders and companies. Like, it just these are in the high times. And I was like, you must be funding people who are just like in this to make a quick buck. He's like, yep, but that's the competitive market we're in. And so I think you're seeing a lot of that wash out. And I even hear from my VCs where they're like, we're just seeing a much higher quality, much more motivated founder on average than we were, in the previous 4 years.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I'm curious will happen is it's not even the quality of the person, but here I've asked this question to somebody like randomly every now and then. But what's your definition between what's your definition? Is there a difference, and if so, what is it between a founder and an entrepreneur?
I've never actually thought about the philosophical differences between them.
What's the practical differences?
I don't know. I'm saying I haven't thought about I've seen, I guess I don't have the data to say this person defines themselves as an entrepreneur and this person defines themselves as a founder, and what are I don't have enough to say this is like my paradigm for each, and therefore I can compare and contrast. I can say that I still feel uncomfortable calling myself a founder. I guess I don't call myself an entrepreneur, right? Like I guess that's never a term that I use for myself. Maybe that's getting to some piece of what you're getting at, but I still feel, I don't know, calling myself a founder. I guess founder is like a loaded word nowadays. It's like it implies something, and I guess I don't know if I have the right yet to call myself a founder. Maybe that's wrong, but I don't know.
I don't think I consider myself a founder until about 5 or 6 years in. Like I would consider myself a tourist, and like it's kind of like you're not a New Yorker until you're 9 years in, type of thing. Like I ascribe to that. Like the day you start is not the day it changes. So like persistence is an inherent part of the definition to me. Longevity is an inherent part of the definition. But okay, let me say this. Someone starts a bodega, or they franchise, they start a bodega or an accounting shop. Would you more associate them as a founder or an entrepreneur?
I think just based on the way that I understand people using those words, I'd call them an entrepreneur. I'm not saying that's my opinion. I'm sort of...
Oh, yeah, you're just saying how others might say it. If you start a bodega...
Yeah, I'm saying based on the way I hear the word used, and yeah, that I would say no. That I'm wait, okay. I want to know what you're getting at. I want to know sort of what's in your head, because there's something there.
Well, I think about when I started in 2013 versus now. What's also happening is it's gotten so mainstream, so popular. Sure, there's tourists and all this money thing, but it's not risky like it used to be. It's not risky enough, and people aren't crazy enough, or there's too many not normal people doing it. And when I'm trying to read more about when Silicon Valley first started, software is more niche. You had to be crazier to go into this thing. You had to really love it. You were taking a much more adventure. It wasn't obvious software was going to eat the world type of thing back then. So I view those folks much more as entrepreneurs. And I view someone like Travis Kalanick as an entrepreneur more than a founder. Because in my head, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, but in my head, your entrepreneurs chart uncharted territories. There's some word of adventure associated with me. Whereas a founder, a founder can be an entrepreneur, but a founder could also be the founder of a nonprofit that's 10 out of 11 things. And so when I go back to the pivot thing, or I think about what is the goal? What are we doing it for? What is the optimization function? Is it to go create something new that the world needs, or the world should need, truly new idea? Or is it getting that $1 million and having product market fit. It's gotten too institutionalized and not art. Like,
well, I think I hear what you're saying. I think the word founder, what I was trying to say, but doing a poor job earlier, I couldn't find the words. It's like founder. The word founder now has a positive cultural valence. It is like calling yourself a founder is almost like performative to a certain degree, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to signal something to others when you call yourself a founder. Whereas I don't think entrepreneur has that same significance. But maybe it's because it's. But I think it's a different. But I think it has a different significance. And when you were talking, it made me think back to what you said about vision. Like maybe entrepreneurs have it's like forward faith. It's like for some reason I just think more it is an entrepreneur is more visionary, more broad scope. As a more founder is like almost like backward looking. I founded something. I am tactically focused. I don't know if
something like
that.
I agree with that, and I think entrepreneurs should be in a higher regard. But the word founder is more commonly used. And I think VCs should be funding entrepreneurs, not founders, type of thing. And I think that's the other thing when we talk about what is the point of a pivot. It should ideally to pivot into something more entrepreneurial, and it's more associated. And again, you need it to like even get in the game. Like I would say, like I'm not saying I'm proof of the thing I'm arguing against, but yeah, that's just something I think a lot about. Is like the pivot is so much more. When I hit like you want to hear pivots as someone trying really hard at something and learning this incredible.
Everyone really apologize. Vasu lost power on his phone. He was dialing from his phone and doing video on his computers for some Wi-Fi reasons, but we were nearing the end of the conversation anyway. So he gives his apologies for this phone running out, but what a fascinating conversation with Vasu. And yeah, excited for the next episode of The Hard Pivot. Got really deep here in some really unexpected areas. Hopefully we continue to provide that kind of content and listening for you guys. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll talk next time.